Over the past couple of days, I've been analyzing my own database and looking at how I've been performing over the past couple of months playing PLO 50. I've been specifically looking for leaks in my own game, as well as trying to find opportunities where I can exploit my opponents. I've been doing this by looking at hand histories and my own frequencies. I've been looking at GTO outcomes and frequencies, as well as analyzing the population tendencies in certain parts of the game tree. Now, one of the things that stuck out for me here, and that is very interesting, and that I want to share with you today, is more about delayed c-betting. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Crushing Small Stakes PLO course. Today we're going to talk about delayed c-betting in position specifically. It's a heads-up single raise pot. The flop went check-check here, and on the turn, the out-of-position player is checking again towards us. Now we have the option to check back or to make a bet, a delayed c-bet. Before we're going to jump into the frequencies here first, I want to share with you that this first lesson is specifically focused on some theory and the frequencies, and the second part of this video is more about hand histories. We will jump into my own database and I will analyze some of the hands where I had the opportunity to make a delayed c-bet. First things first, let's look at the frequencies when it comes to delayed c-betting in position in a single raised heads-up pot. If we look at GTO outcomes here and frequencies, we can see that it's very often between 40 and 50%. Obviously, these frequencies can be different based on pre-flop ranges in play, based on the turn texture shift and the card that is coming. But very, very often, these are somewhat the average numbers that we can expect here. If we look at population tendencies for this specific situation, we can see that it's only 38% of the time. So we're already lower than the recommended frequency here. What struck me more here even was my own delayed c-bet frequency in position, which was only at 28% of the time. I mean, this number is way too infrequent and way too low. And this told me that it was time for me to investigate the situation a little bit more deeply. If we then look at the success rate of making a delayed c-bet in position here, we can see that 60 to 65% of the time here, we actually win the pot by betting. In other words, the out-of-position player in the big blind is check folding versus delayed c-bet 60 to 65% of the time. I mean, that already tells us that the situation is very profitable for us being in position here. Now, why is it that we have such a low delayed c-bet frequency? There are different reasons for it. There can be different reasons for it. First of all, it's possible that many of us are c-betting too many medium strong hands on the flop. Now, the reason why we don't want to c-bet too many medium strong hands on the flop is that these hands don't have the right characteristics to go bet, bet, and maybe bet again, double or triple barreling on the majority of runouts. If you c-bet the flop, you want to mainly do that with hands that can often bet again on later streets. But if you have a medium strong hand that can't handle all those runouts and transitions to turns and rivers, you will often end up checking on those streets. And that is not a great recipe in the first place to make a bet. Another reason here that is important to think about when it comes to c-betting medium strong hands is that we don't want to get check raised on the flop. So we want to rather pot control with these hands and not risk getting raised on the flop. However, if we then c-bet too many of these hands on the flop, as many will do, what this means for the turn then is that if we check back the turn, we don't have all these medium strong hands anymore in our flop check back range. And on a turn delayed c-bet, many of these medium strong hands on the flop, they can go for a turn bet, for a turn delay bet, because from here, there aren't as many streets anymore to play. We can go for a lighter value bet, we can go for a protection bet. But if we don't have these hands anymore as much in our range, because we already bet them on the flop, our turn delayed c-bet frequency will drop. Another reason could be that we are missing out on semi-bluff or bluffing opportunities. In other words, we miss out on blockers that we have. We miss out on the fact that we pick up equity with our hand that doesn't have showdown value. There are different reasons for it, but it's very important to pay critically attention to the bluffing opportunities on turn situations when the flop went check-check. And lastly, I think many of us, including myself, they have generally a low awareness of the big blind tendency. We just saw that the big blind is check folding around 60 to 65% of the time. And I'm pretty sure that none of us is expecting that high number. We know that the big blind will check fold probably more than GTO recommended. But that it's this high, we don't really know that. And it's good to become aware of these kind of things. Lastly, before we're going to jump into the hand examples in the next video, I want to tell you a few principles for the in-position player when it comes to delayed c-betting and making the choice whether or not to go for that bet. You want to ask yourself a few questions on the turn when you are in this situation. You want to ask yourself how much showdown value you have. The less showdown value you have, if you have no showdown value, the more likely it is you potentially would want to go for a bet. Did I pick up any equity? If you have a naked hand, a bare hand without any showdown value, or a complete missed hand here, and you did pick up equity on the turn, it's very likely that you can go for a bet here, because the bluff will become more profitable, because your bluff now has also some equity. Did I turn valuable blockers? If you turn the valuable blocker on the turn, it's very likely now that you can actually go for that delayed turn bet. And fourthly, what is my opponent's tendencies? We just saw that the population tendency is to check fold very much. But if your opponent is not check folding as much anymore, you want to become a little bit more critically here and ask yourself deeper questions like, is a bet still profitable or not? But in general, we know that the opponents are check folding very often. And if you know that, then you can already understand that bluffing becomes much more profitable here. So these 4 questions, keep them in mind and make sure to understand them and to think a little bit about them. And next time when you are in this situation, ask yourself these questions to come up with a good answer, whether or not to check or bet. Very often, the less showdown value you have, if you have any of these characteristics in your hand here, it's very often a good idea to go for that bet on the turn. So I hope you enjoyed this first part. It was some theory, some frequencies. I recommend you to check out video number 2. You can find it in the next video, obviously here. And there we will go into some hand histories I played myself, where I had the opportunity to make a delayed c-bet. Check it out and I'll see you there.